Is that some kind of joke? The voice was young, sharp, and laced with casual arrogance of a man who had never known a day of true doubt. It cut through the warm afternoon air at Fort Benning's annual family day, a bubble of manufactured peace filled with the scent of grilled hot dogs and the distant pop of a rifle range demonstration. Sergeant Miller, his ranger tab, a stark, black and gold decoration on his shoulder, gestured with a half-eaten corn dog toward the old man's forearm. Seriously, what is that supposed to be? A drunken doodle from a port call-in. Nam, Randall Bishop, 82 years old, didn't flinch. He sat on a simple park bench, a solitary island in a sea of young military families. His back was straight, his hands resting on his knees. His gaze remained fixed on a group of children chasing a soccer ball across the parade ground. Their laughter, a sound he had once thought he would never hear again. He had come here not for the celebration, but for the quiet hum of belonging, a frequency only a place like this could broadcast. Another ranger, younger still, snickered. Looks like a worm trying to eat a bottle cap. Sarge. Miller took a step closer, his shadow falling over Randall. The festive noise around them seemed to dim, the world shrinking to the space between the young sergeant's polished jump boots and Randall's worn leather shoes. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was loud, enough for everyone nearby to hear. Hey, Pop, a little friendly advice. You might want to cover that thing up. It's a little embarrassing for the rest of us. Sets a bad example for the new recruits. You know, the Army's got standards now. The small circle of Rangers around. Miller laughed. They were a pack, brimming with the invincible energy of youth and rigorous training. They saw the world in black and white, in pass or fail, in strength and weakness. Before them, they saw only weakness. They saw a frail old man with watery blue eyes and skin like wrinkled parchment. They saw a faded, blurry tattoo on a withered arm, a messy blue-black coil of ink that looked ancient and meaningless. It was a relic, and in their world of cutting-edge technology and modern warfare, relics were meant for museums, not active duty. Military bases. Randall slowly turned, his head, his eyes finally meeting Miller's. There was no anger in them, no fear, only a deep, profound weariness, the kind that settles in a man's bones after a lifetime of carrying secrets. It has its meaning, Randall said, his voice a low, growly rasp. Miller smirked, his confidence swelling with what he perceived as a victory. Oh, I bet it does. I bet you got a lot of stories. How you and your buddies fought off a whole battalion with a single rifle, right? He straightened up and addressed his friends. These old-timers, they love their war stories. Problem is, after a few decades, they can't tell the truth from the fiction they've been spinning at the VFW bar. The insult hung in the air, thick and ugly. A few onlookers, drawn by the confrontation, shifted uncomfortably. A mother pulled her child a little closer. This was not part of the carefully curated fun of the day. This was something real, something sour. Show me your ID, Miller demanded, his tone shifting from mockery to official. He was flexing the only authority he had. Let's see if you're even authorized to be here. We have to be careful about stolen valor. The accusation was a final stone cast. Stolen valor. It was the ultimate sin in their world, a betrayal of the trust and sacrifice that bound them all together. To them, Randall Bishop, with his quiet demeanor and his strange, indecipherable tattoo, was an anomaly. He didn't fit their image of a hero. Heroes were loud. Heroes were proud. Heroes had stories they were eager to tell. This man was just quiet. Randall reached into his back pocket, his movement slow and deliberate. He pulled out a worn leather wallet, the kind that molds itself to a man's shape over a lifetime. He fumbled with the clasp, his fingers stiff with age. Miller let out an impatient sigh, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He was used to speed, to efficiency, to immediate compliance. The old man's slowness grated on him, another sign of his obsolescence. As Randall opened the wallet, a faded corner of a photograph peeked out, a ghost of a young man's face. For a fleeting second, the image seemed to pull Randall away from the sunny parade ground. He wasn't there anymore. The world went silent, replaced by the humid, oppressive heat of a jungle night. The air was thick with the smell of mud and decay. The only light came from a single sputtering candle. A brother in arms, his face slick with sweat and streaked with camouflage paint, was holding his arm. The sting was sharp, rhythmic, a piece of sharpened bamboo dipped in a crude ink made of gunpowder and ash. He could hear their captain's voice, a low whisper that was more powerful than a shout. They will never know our names. They will never find our bodies, but they will know we're here. This mark is our stone, our memory. The symbol taking shape on his skin was a coiled serpent, its fangs clenched around a single solitary star, a pact made in the heart of darkness, a promise to a ghost unit that would soon be erased from history. He blinked and the jungle was gone. The bright Georgia's sun was in his eyes. Sergeant Miller was staring at him, his hand outstretched, palm up, demanding. The moment of memory, the flash of a life lived in the shadows, had passed, unnoticed by anyone but him. Nearby, a woman named Sarah clutched her phone, her knuckles white. She was a military spouse, and she had seen her share of bravado, but this was different. This was cruelty. She had been trying to get a picture of her son on the climbing wall when the raised voices drew her attention. She watched the young rangers, puffing out their chests, pining for each other at the expense of an old man's dignity. It made her stomach turn. She knew she couldn't intervene directly. It would only make things worse. But she couldn't just stand there and do nothing. She remembered a conversation with her father, a retired command sergeant major, a man who had forgotten more about the Army than these young rangers would ever know. He had always told her, respect isn't about the rank on the collar, it's about the miles on the soul. She quickly dialed his number. Dad, she said, keeping her voice low, I'm at the family day at Benning. There's a group of rangers here, and there her father's voice on. The other end was calm, but she could hear the steel underneath. What's going on, honey? She described the scene, the mockery, the insults, the demand for an ID. They're making fun of his tattoo. Dad, it's old and faded. It looks like a snake with a star. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line, followed by a long, dead silence. For a moment, Sarah thought the call had dropped. Dad, are you there? Sarah, he said, and his voice was completely different. It was tight, urgent, stripped of all warmth. Describe the man. What's his name? I don't know, she whispered. Just then Miller's voice carried across the lawn. Come on, old man. The ID. Let's see it. What's your name? Randall Bishop. Never heard of you. Sarah relayed the name to her father. His name is Randall Bishop. The silence that followed was even more profound than the first. When her father spoke again, his voice was a choked whisper. Oh my God, Sarah, listen to me. Do not let that man leave. Do whatever you have to do, but keep him there. I'm making a call. You have no idea who you're looking at. The line went dead. Sarah stood frozen, her heart pounding. The crowd around the confrontation was growing, a circle of silent witnesses to a humiliation that was rapidly approaching its peak. She looked at Randall Bishop, at his quiet dignity in the face of such arrogance, and a chilling realization washed over her. The young rangers thought they were the predators cornering their prey. They had no idea they were a group of children poking a sleeping dragon. The phone call from retired command sergeant Major Wallace hit the base commander's office like a lightning strike. The aide on duty, a young captain accustomed to scheduling meetings and fielding calls from politicians, was not prepared for the raw urgency in Wallace's voice. Don't care if he's in a meeting with God himself. Wallace barked, his voice cracking with an emotion the captain couldn't place. You get General Matthews on this line right now. Tell him it's about Night Adder. Sir, I'm not familiar with that. You don't have to be familiar with it, son. Just say the name. The captain rattled, put the call on hold, and burst into the general's inner sanctum without knocking. General Matthews, a man whose stern visage was etched onto the very soul of the base, looked up from a stack of reports, his eyes dark with annoyance. This had better be a matter of national security, Captain. He growled, Sir, I have retired command. Sergeant Major Wallace on the line. He's extremely agitated. He said to tell you it's about Night Adder, and that a man named Randall Bishop is on the main parade ground. The effect of those words was immediate and terrifying. The color drained from General Matthews' face. The pen in his hand slipped from his fingers, clattering onto the polished oak of his desk. His gaze shot to a small, unassuming frame on his credenza. It held a black and white photograph of a dozen young men in worn-out jungle fatigues, their faces gaunt and shadowed, but their eyes burning with an unsettling intensity. They were ghosts. They were all supposed to be ghosts. My God, the general whispered. His voice, he stood up so quickly his chair scraped loudly against the floor. He's alive. The formidable commander was gone, replaced by a man staring into the abyss of his own history. He grabbed the edge of his desk, his knuckles white. The captain stood frozen, witnessing a reaction he couldn't possibly comprehend. Get my car, the general ordered, his voice a low, powerful command that vibrated with decades of authority. Now, scramble the base honor guard. I want them on the parade ground in 5 minutes. Get Colonel Jennings from the historical archives. Tell him to bring the sealed files on Operation Night Adder and get the ranger, regimental commander, and his entire command staff. I want them standing on that field when I get there. Move back. On the sun-drenched lawn, Sergeant Miller's patience had finally evaporated. Randall Bishop silent, refusal to be intimidated. His calm defiance had worn through Miller's thin veneer of professional control. He saw it as a personal challenge, a rejection of his authority in front of his men and a growing crowd of onlookers. Oh, right, that's it, Miller snapped, taking a step forward. He reached out, his intention clear. He was going to grab the old man's arm and physically escort him from the premises. You're done, old man. You're causing a public disturbance. I think it's time we took a little walk, maybe a trip to the VA for a checkup is in order. See if your head's on straight. It was the ultimate overreach, a threat wrapped in a condescending insult to suggest a man of Randall's age was seen out to physically lay hands on him. It was a line that should never have been crossed. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Sarah, the woman on the phone, felt a surge of cold dread. This was escalating far beyond mockery. Just as Miller's fingers were about to close around Randall's arm, a sound cut through the air, sharp and insistent. It wasn't the festive music or the pop of the rifle range. It was the wail of sirens growing closer at an alarming rate. These were not the sirens of a fire truck or an ambulance. They were the distinct authoritative blare of a command convoy. Heads turned, all eyes swiveled toward the main road. A fleet of 4 black staff cars led by 2 MP vehicles with lights flashing was speeding toward them. They didn't slow down. They drove directly onto the grass of the parade ground, scattering families who had been picnicking on blankets. The cars screeched to a halt, less than 50 feet from the confrontation, doors flying open before the vehicles had fully stopped. MPs in crisp uniforms fanned out, creating a wide, unreachable perimeter. They moved with a silent, intimidating efficiency that immediately changed the entire atmosphere of the event. The festive air vanished. replaced by a tense electric silence. From the lead car, a figure emerged. The afternoon sun glinted off the floor. Polished stars on his collar, General Matthews. He was flanked by his aide, the base command sergeant major, and a handful of other grim-faced high-ranking officers. They moved across the grass, like a force of nature, their eyes fixed on the small drama unfolding by the bench. The crowd parted for them as if, by an invisible hand. Sergeant Miller and his rangers snapped to attention, their bodies rigid, their faces a comical mask of shock, confusion, and dawning terror. The corn dog was long, forgotten, dropped in the grass. Miller's mind raced, trying to comprehend what was happening. Why was the base commander, a four-star general, personally responding to a minor disturbance with a full-blown honor guard and his entire command staff? General Matthews strode past the petrified rangers as if they were statues. He didn't give them a single glance. His entire focus, his entire world was the old man sitting on the bench. He stopped a few feet from Randall Bishop. For a long moment, the two men just looked at each other. An 82-year-old sergeant and a 58-year-old general, separated by decades, but connected by a history that no one else there could possibly understand. The general's stern, weathered face seemed to soften, the hard lines around his eyes easing. He took in the faded blue-black tattoo on Randall's forearm, the coiled serpent, the single star held in its fangs. It was exactly as the archives had described it. Then, in an act that sent a shock wave through the silent crowd, General Matthews drew himself up to his full height, his back ramrod straight. He raised his hand to his brow and executed the sharpest, most meaningful salute of his entire decorated career. His voice, a commander's voice used to booming across entire formations, was clear and resonant, filled with emotion that bordered on reverence. "Sergeant Bishop," he said, his voice carrying across the stunned silence. "It is an honor, sir." He held the salute, his arm rigid, a statue of pure, unadulterated respect. Slowly, painfully, Randall Bishop rose to his feet. He met the general's gaze, and with a weary grace that spoke of battles, both seen and unseen, he returned a slow, tired salute. The gesture was a bridge across 50 years of forgotten history. General Matthews dropped his salute and turned to face the crowd, his eyes sweeping over the onlookers, the families, and finally settling with the weight of an avalanche on Sergeant Miller and his men. A colonel stepped forward, handing the general a thin file. "For those of you who don't know," the general began, his voice now cold as steel, "you are looking at a living legend. You are looking at the last surviving member of a unit that until this morning was considered a ghost. Military Assistance Command, Vietnam Studies and Observations Group, Task Force Night. Adder." He let the name hang in the air. It meant nothing to most, but to the military historians and the high-ranking officers present, it was the stuff of myth. A unit so secret its records were ordered sealed for 50 years. A unit that officially never existed. A unit comprised of the toughest men this army has ever produced, sent on missions that no one else would dare undertake. He opened the file. In 1968, during the TED offensive, an Air Force intelligence officer was shot down deep in enemy territory in Laos. He carried information that if it fell into enemy hands would have compromised the entire strategic operations in the theater. It would have cost thousands of American lives. The general paused, his eyes finding Randall's. The president authorized a rescue, but it was deemed a suicide mission. No conventional unit could get in and out, so they sent Night Adder, a 12-man team. They were inserted 50 miles behind enemy lines with one objective: get the pilot. They were surrounded, outnumbered 100 to 1. For 3 days they fought. They fought until their ammunition ran out. They fought with knives and with their bare hands. He looked down at the paper, though he didn't need it. They got the pilot. They got him to the extraction point, but the unit was overrun. The official record states the entire team was wiped out, lost in action, bodies never recovered. Their names were erased, their mission buried, all for the sake of national security. But the record was wrong. One man survived, wounded, alone, hunted for weeks. He made his way through the jungle and back across the border. This man, Sergeant Randall Bishop. A wave of awe and shame washed over the crowd. People were openly weeping. The young Rangers looked as though they had been physically struck. The faded tattoo was not a drunken mistake. It was a tombstone. It was a battle flag. It was the last vestige of a brotherhood of ghosts. The general closed the file with a sharp snap. His gaze, now burning with a cold fire, fell upon Sergeant Miller. "You," he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "You and your men, you with a ranger tab on your shoulder. You stand here on this sacred ground, and you dare to disrespect a man who embodies every value that tab is supposed to represent." He took a step toward them. They flinched. "You think you know hardship? You think you understand sacrifice? You are not fit to stand in this man's shadow. Your arrogance today has brought shame upon this uniform, upon the Ranger Regiment, and upon the memory of every soldier who died fighting for what you so clearly take for granted." He gestured to the base command sergeant major. "Take their names, every single one of them. They will be confined to barracks, and they will each write a 10,000-word essay on the history of MAC VSOG with a specific focus on Task Force Night Adder. They will deliver it in person to Sergeant Bishop's home with a formal written apology." He turned back to Randall, his expression softening once more. "Sergeant," Randall raised a hand, stopping him. "General," he said, his voice quiet but firm, carrying a wisdom that shamed all the anger in the air. "They're just kids full of fire and vinegar. We were the same once. It's easy to forget when you're that young that the uniform doesn't make the soldier makes the uniform." His words were not an excuse. They were a lesson in humility, grace, and the quiet strength that defined his entire life. As he spoke, the image of the tattoo seemed to sharpen in the afternoon light. The world flickered. Again, he was a young man again, barely 20, huddled in a dark, smoky hooch deep in the Little Oceanian jungle. The air was thick with fear and camaraderie. Their captain, a man with eyes that had seen too much, held up a needle in a pot of ink. "There won't be a parade for us," the captain had said, his voice a low rumble. "There won't be a stone with our names on it. The world will never know. We were here, but we will know. This symbol, this night adder, this is our stone. This is our promise to each other, that we did our duty no matter the cost." He looked at the faces of his brothers, young men who would be dead in 72 hours, as they took the needle one by one, branding themselves as family, as ghosts. The story of what happened on the parade ground at Fort Benning spread like wildfire. The military spouse, Sarah, wrote a blog post that was shared tens of thousands of times. National news outlets picked it up. The Pentagon, facing a public relations nightmare and a genuine outpouring of support for the forgotten hero, moved swiftly. Within a week, a formal ceremony was held. In front of the entire base, General Matthews pinned the distinguished service cross and a Purple Heart on Randall Bishop's chest, medals he had earned over 50 years earlier. The Army issued a public apology, not just for the incident but for the decades of silence. As a direct result, a new training module on military history and the importance of respecting veterans of all eras was mandated for all incoming soldiers, starting with the Ranger Regiment. A few weeks later, Randall was sitting in his usual booth at a local diner, a quiet place where nobody knew his name, or at least pretended not to.